Hello everyone, this is Glenda Winkleman and welcome back to Creative Grandma. It's Stitch of the Week time and this episode is called number 230, the Tunisian Before and After Stitch. Now the reason the stitch is named Before and After is because when we're working these stitches here, we insert our hook before the stitch and then we're going to insert it on the other side after the stitch to make our stitch. So that's why it's called Before and After. I have 3 samples here. My first sample, this one, was made changing colors with every row. So let me try to get this. Okay, I started with the white. I did my basic first row. And then I come back with the before and after stitch, and this tiny stitch here is the knit stitch. And then you start and repeat rows 2 and 3 over. So this is what it looks like. Now this is a variegated yarn, and I forgot my samples to tell you what this yarn is, but these are all Red Heart Super Saver yarns. So 1 row of white and 1 row with the variegated. And then I also made my classic white sample. I think this is showing up okay. This is just done in 1 solid color. And if you look closely, you can see here's the knit stitch, and then here's the before and after stitch. Knit stitch, before and after. Just a nice classic look. Now this is a heavier fabric. And then this one, you start with 1 color. I started with the white. And then I worked 2 rows in the next color, 2 rows in the next, just to try to show you the different way these stitch patterns look. Again, this is the solid. This is changing colors every 2 rows. And then this one, I'm going to flip it upside down. This one, you're changing colors in every row. So nice classic look. This kind of looks like a zipper, like some type of zipper stitch. And then this is where you change colors in every row just to get this softly muted white in there. So those are my 3 samples. So this is kind of a quick, easy stitch once you know how to do it. Now these samples here were made using a 10.5K crochet hook, Afghan hook. So for today's sample, I am going to use this size 11, an L11 8mm hook. I'm using a larger hook just so it shows the stitches up better so you can see exactly where I'm putting the hook and where the stitches go. I'm also chose this basic Stitch Studio by Nicole in color number 13, and I also chose this number 38 soft green. Nice kind of bright colors for fall to make this stitch sample. So if you want to follow along, if you don't have a size L Afghan hook, go ahead and grab a size 10.5K. I'm only going to chain 10 for this sample, just a short, quick show you how to do it because it's pretty basic and pretty simple. So go ahead and grab your stuff. I'll be right back, and I'll already have my chain 10 on my hook, so get your chain 10 ready and we'll get this project started. I have my chain 10 ready. I did forget to mention to try to do your first chain 10 really loosely. So if you didn't do them loose, go ahead and rip them out and chain 10 again real kind of loose, because what we're going to do is we're going to be working in these back bumps here on the back of your foundation chain. So go ahead and do that. Pause the video and redo your chain 10 loosely, and then come on back. So okay, to start this first foundation chain row, what we're going to do is you're going to be flipping your work over. I'm going to try to get close up, and you'll see I gotta take this hook out. You'll see these here, what everybody calls back bumps. So here's the front of your chain, and if you turn it back, you want to use these bumps. Now you can go in the stitch if you don't want to deal with the back bumps, because either way your work's going to curl. A lot of people say, how do you get your Tunisian to quit curling? just about every Tunisian stitch I've done curls. I usually correct that by the border because the weight of the border holds that down and by blocking it. So, okay, let's get started on here. We're going to skip this first one because that's your first stitch and this is going to bend over. We're going to skip the first one. We're going to come back here and go in this next one. Just insert your hook into that back bump, yarn over the hook, and pull it through. And I'll show you what this creates. It creates a excellent edging here, so when you're finished with your project, it just pulls these up into a nice edging where you can just come right back and find that stitch. Very, very nice. Go into the next bump in the back of your chain, yarn over, pull it through. Go over to the next back bump, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull it through that bump. And as you can see, it kind of forms that. It almost looks the same as the chain. But if you didn't do this, then you only get this half a chain down here, and it doesn't look as nice. So let's go ahead and finish across. Look for your next back bump, which is here. It's just the one that goes horizontal across, yarn over the hook, and pull it through that stitch. Flip your chain over, look for that next back bump. It's the horizontal little strand going across. Insert your hook under that strand, yarn over the hook, and pull it through that stitch. And you're just going to continue that across your work into the next bump. And see, if you chain loosely, it's a lot easier to get in that back bump. If you crochet too tightly, you're going to be like trying to cram it in there, and you'll just have an awful time. And then we're over at our last stitch, and then just look for that strand of yarn right through the middle of that circle. You're just going to go under that last back bump, yarn over the hook, and pull it through. So if you chain 20 or 10 or 100, you should have that number of loops on your hook. I chained 10, so I should have 10 loops. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So always make sure your loops are the same as your starting chain. Okay, so to take this row off, you're going to yarn over the hook and pull it through the first loop only. To take the remaining stitches off, yarn over the hook and go through 2 loops only. Yarn over the hook and through 2 loops only. Yarn over the hook and through 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over the hook and through 2 loops. 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 This last loop on your hook counts as your first stitch of the next row. So now row 2 is going to be the beginning of our repeat rows. So row 2 and 3 will be the rows that you're going to repeat over and over again. So what we're going to do for row 2 is we skip this edging stitch here, because this stitch is this stitch. Your loop counts as this stitch here. So if you look at your row 1, you'll see this space between the edge stitch. You have a space, you have your stitch, you have a space, you have your next stitch. So the before and after stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook between your edge stitch and this next stitch. We're not going in it, we're going beside it. So go between your edge stitch and the next stitch, right in this space here, in this opening. So front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through that space. So now that was the before stitch. So now we're going to do the after stitch. Here's our stitch. So we're going on the other side of that same stitch. So this is our after stitch. That's before, and then we're going to go after the stitch. So you're going after this stitch, but before the next one. So insert it between the stitch you're working on and the next stitch, yarn over and pull it through. So as you can see, we have our beginning loop, and then we have our before stitch before the stitch, and we have our stitch after the stitch. So before and after. If you remember that, then you'll remember that you're doing the stitch correctly. So we inserted, pull a loop up before the stitch, and then we inserted after the stitch, and we pulled a loop up. Now, what happens is that's one stitch. We have two loops. So we have to cut that down to one loop. So yarn over the hook and pull it through two loops. And this is what makes us go back to our original count. So like I said, if you have a chain 10, this makes it come back to a chain 10. If you didn't take those two loops off, then you would have had like a chain 22. So here is how you do it. Okay, we're going to do our next stitch. So you're going to go in the same space as you just worked because you need to go before the stitch. So insert your hook in the same space because it's after this stitch, but you have to do it before the next stitch. So insert your hook before that next stitch, front to back, yarn over, pull up a loop. Keep that loop on your hook. Now you're going to do the same thing. If you have to, kind of stick your fingers in there and find those openings. So if you stretch it, you can kind of see where you're going in. See those square openings? That's the spaces you're going to be working in. Before the stitch, after the stitch, and then before the stitch and after the stitch. I'll quit talking so much and just show you how to do it because I don't mean to confuse you. We just did before the stitch, so now we're going to insert after the stitch in that space between the stitches. Yarn over the hook and pull it through. So now you're before and after. We need to take these two loops down to one. So yarn over the hook and pull it through two loops. We're going to go into the same space we just worked, and you're going to insert from front to back before the next stitch. So yarn over the hook and pull it through. Now you're going to insert your hook after the stitch. So insert your hook after the stitch on the other side, front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through. So we have to ignore these and only worry about the before and after. We have the two loops, yarn over and pull through two loops only. We're going to insert our hook into that same space before the next stitch, front to back, yarn over, pull it through. Now we're going to insert our hook behind that stitch. Insert your hook from front to back on the other side of that stitch, yarn over the hook and pull it through. Now we're going to reduce this to one stitch. Yarn over the hook and pull it through two loops only. So now here's our next stitch. We need to go before and we need to go after. So insert into that same space, yarn front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through. You just worked before the stitch. Now we're going to work after the stitch. Insert right after that stitch in that space, yarn over the hook and pull it through. Now we need to reduce these two stitches to one, yarn over the hook and pull it through two loops only. Now to do the next stitch, here's your next stitch. We need to go before it and we need to go after it. Insert your hook before that next stitch, front to back, yarn over, pull it through that space. Now we're going to insert our hook after that stitch, front to back, yarn over the hook, and pull it through that space. We need to reduce the two stitches to one, so yarn over the hook and pull it through two loops only. We have 3 stitches to go. This is our next stitch. Insert your hook in the front of that stitch, front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through. That was the before. Now we need to insert it after the stitch. So insert your hook after the stitch, front to back, yarn over and pull it through. You need to reduce those 2 stitches to 1, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops only. Need to pull some more yarn out. Okay. This is our next stitch. We're going to insert our hook in front of that stitch in that space, yarn over the hook and pull it through. We need to insert our hook after that stitch. So insert your hook after the stitch in that space, yarn over the hook and pull it through. We need to reduce those 2 loops down to 1, so yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops only. So now we are at our last stitch. So for our last stitch, you do that differently. Now for this row, we're going to go in this top loop only, just this top loop. So insert your hook under that vertical stitch, yarn over the hook, and pull it through that stitch. Now count your stitches. If you started with 10, you should have 10 loops. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So to take your loops off will be the same with each row. You're going to yarn over the hook and you're going to pull it through 1 loop only. To take the remaining loops off, you will yarn over the hook and through 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over the hook and through 2 loops. 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 Yarn over the hook through 2 loops. We're down to our last loop, and yarn over the hook and pull through 2 loops. This last loop remains and counts as the first stitch of the next row. So let me pull some more yarn out here. Okay. So the next row will be the knit stitch. And this is what I was telling you about. When you do in the back loops, you can see how beautiful it leaves that edging where you can go right in that edging. Like when you're working around, this will be upside down because you'll be working across the bottom of your work for your border. So it makes it so much easier to find those stitches. So that's why people work in the back bump. But it's your choice whether you want to do that or just go in a regular stitch. Okay, so for this next row, this will be the knit stitch. So for row 3, this is your last repeat row. You will leave this loop on your hook and you will insert your hook. Oops. You're going to go into this space here. If you look at your stitch, it goes up like a loop, like a horseshoe, and then you have these 2 horizontal strands coming through. You can see them there. So what you're going to do is you're going to work your stitches right underneath those in the bottom, underneath those stitches in that loop. So you'll go over here and each stitch you'll work in the bottom of that. So to work the knit stitch, we're going to insert our hook in the bottom of that loop underneath those 2 horizontal strands of yarn. So insert right in the center of that stitch. You're going to go front to back right through that space. Yarn over the hook and you're going to pull it through. And what that does is it spreads that stitch right in half and opens it up. And that looks like a knit stitch. That's why it's called the knit stitch. So you're going to go ahead and work that across. You're going to go to the next stitch. You're going to go right between those 2 strands underneath these into that space there. So pull those stitches apart, insert your hook right in that space there, front to back. Yarn over the hook and pull it through. And you see how it opens up that stitch. Now we're just going to repeat that across. Go right in, find that next space. I'm trying to spread that apart to show you. There it is. Go underneath these into that hole right there and that opening underneath there, front to back, yarn over and pull it through. Find your next stitch, and a lot of times it helps if you keep your finger back there. You can kind of like find it that way. Or just follow that stitch down, stick your hook underneath it, and then just go clear to the back. Yarn over and pull it through. You have your own method. Once you start crocheting, you can watch somebody else, but you get comfortable with how you do it. So you find that spot underneath that top vertical stitch, go under it, through that opening and to the back, and pull it through. So you'll get your own method of figuring out how to do it. Right in that space underneath these 2 strands of yarn, go in that hole, the opening in that horseshoe shape, yarn over the hook and pull it through. Find your next opening, going to go in that space, yarn over the hook and pull it through. Find your next stitch. You can pull that top loop back so you can see it better, insert it underneath there in that space, yarn over and pull it through. Okay, now for this row we're over to our last stitch. So for this row, the knit stitch kind of pulls the work down, so it won't be as high as this row. So in order to keep this side of your work even and make it look nice, we have to go under both loops. So come over to your edge, and here's the top and here's the bottom. You need to go under both of those loops like that. Yarn over the hook and pull it through both loops. And this is what your work should look like. You can see that nice row of your knit stitch. You should have 10 loops on your hook, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So now we're going to take row 3 off. Same as the others, yarn over the hook and pull it through 1 loop. Yarn over the hook, and for the remaining you're going to pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook and pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over the hook and pull through 2 loops. So I stopped at my last 2 loops because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and join my orange, which I did not have ready. So give me 1 second to pull enough out. It's a brand new skein, so I want to have enough. I'm going to throw this yarn over here. And what I do is I tie. I'll take this yarn because what I'm going to do is I only have to tie it once because I'm going to carry it up on the side of my work because I'm changing colors every 2 rows, and you can do this same method changing colors every row. If you're using 2 different colors and you're carrying up the side, you can go ahead and work it this way. So I tied my yarn onto the right where the work touches. I'm going to let this hang right on the back of my work, and I'm just going to pick up my new color. So when you have your last 2 loops on your hook is when you're going to change color. So you're going to just grab that new color, yarn over the hook, and you're going to pull it through those last 2 loops. This brings the new color up to the next row. So we're going to work row 2 again because that's our repeat row. So what you're going to do is, this is the before and after stitch row. You're going to insert your hook between the edge stitch and that next stitch, front to back. Underneath those horizontal strands, you're going to grab that yarn, yarn over the hook, and pull it through. You're going to go after the stitch. You're going to insert your hook right after that stitch in that space between the stitches. Yarn over the hook and pull it through. You're going to reduce these 2 loops down to 1, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2. You're going to go into that same space because you need to go before the next stitch, which means you're working in the same space you just worked. So insert your hook before the next stitch, front to back, yarn over and pull it through. Now you need to work after the stitch. So insert your hook after this same stitch, front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through. You need to reduce these 2 loops to 1, so yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops only. Insert your hook in front of this next stitch, between the stitches, right in front of it, yarn over the hook and pull it through that space. Now you're going to insert your hook after that same stitch. Insert from front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through this space. You need to reduce these 2 loops to 1, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops. Here's your next stitch. We're going to work before and after. Insert before the stitch, yarn over the hook and pull it through. Insert your hook after the stitch, front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through. We need to reduce these 2 loops to 1, so yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops. And that is how you do that row. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this row with you. I'm going to do row 3 one more time because I know I talked a lot in between doing it and I might have confused you. So let's finish this row. Insert before this next stitch, front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through. And we're always working under these horizontal strands. You're going to be working in these openings here. Insert after this same stitch here. Front to back, yarn over, pull it through. We're going to reduce the 2 loops to 1, which helps keep our stitch count the same. You're going to insert your hook before that next stitch in that same space we just worked, front to back, yarn over, pull it through. We're going to insert our hook after that next stitch between the stitches, front to back, yarn over the hook, pull it through, reduce the 2 loops to 1, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops. Insert your hook in front of that next stitch in the same space we just worked, front to back, yarn over the hook and pull it through. Insert your hook after the same stitch you're just working on, front to back, yarn over the hook, pull it through the space, reduce the 2 loops to 1, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2. We're near our end of our sample, so insert your hook in front of this next stitch, back, yarn over the hook and pull it through that space. Insert your hook after that stitch, front to back, yarn over, pull it through. Reduce these 2 loops to 1, yarn over, pull it through 2. We're at the end of the row, and for this row we're only going to go into that top loop. So insert underneath the top strand, the top vertical stitch of the end stitch, yarn over and pull it through. So this row we're going to take off the same as the other rows, yarn over, pull it through 1 loop only, yarn over, pull it through 2 loops, 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 yarn over and pull it through 2 loops. Now the only thing you have to watch is because this kind of looks like 2 rows, but it's not. This is all the same row. So when you're working this pattern, it kind of looks like you already did the knit stitch. Well, you didn't. So just remember, look on your side. Okay, I only did 1 row. Even though it looks like 2 rows over here, do not let that confuse you. This is all just 1 row. And the way you can tell that is when you're over at the end. If you only have, well, if you only have 1 orange stitch on the end, then you know you did not do your knit stitch row. So this row looks like 2, but it's 1. I just wanted to clarify that because when I was doing this stitch, I had to keep looking and say, did I do that knit stitch? So that's why I'm pointing it out. Okay, so this is going to be row 3, our last repeat row, because you're doing rows 2 and 3, we're working the knit stitch. So you're just going to go into the center of that stitch underneath those horizontal strands right in the center. Insert front to back, yarn over and pull it through. So you're just going to repeat that knit stitch across for row 3, insert under that vertical stitch, and then just go clear to the back, yarn over and pull it through. So you're just working the knit stitch across for row 3 in each stitch across. We'll work to the end, and then when I come back across, I'm going to show you how to bind off your work. Usually I slip stitch across, but I didn't like the way it pulled the work down, so I changed the way I did that. Okay, I'm over at the end of my knit stitch row, And what we're going to do is to keep your work even, because the knit row is shorter than this row, we need to go under both loops. So you're going to go under the top and the bottom loop, yarn over the hook and pull it through. So you need to remember that, and if you don't, then what's going to happen is your work, and this is normal, this stitch will come up higher because this row pulls it up. So if you think that's wrong, it's not. That's correct. This will look like this. But just remember the before and after row, you go in the top loop only at the end, and in your knit row you go in both loops at the end. But this is normal. This will pull up here like that. Okay, so yarn over and pull it through one loop, yarn over, pull it through two, yarn over and pull it through two loops, yarn over, pull it through two, yarn over, pull it through two, yarn over, pull it through two, yarn over, pull it through two. We're going to continue that across until we only have the two loops on the hook. So you'll have your ending remaining loop and the other loop. So you'll have two loops. So when I ended this pattern, I bind off after I do the knit row. So after you do row 3 for however many rows or whatever you're working on, that's when we're going to bind off. Now I'm carrying my yarn behind the back, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this green and I'm going to pull it right up and pull it through those stitches. Now I'm using a really big hook, so your yarn will continue to carry up with a look like that on the back. But when I work my border, I take this yarn, and when I'm working, I work in that edge stitch, and then I pull this up and I work right over it, so it kind of really hides it. So it's a nice way if you don't like changing yarn every row. If you're only working, you know, and changing colors every 1 or 2 rows. Now I don't think I would do this if I'm working more than 3 or 4 rows, you know. 1 or 2 rows is fine. Anything more than that, you're going to have this long strand up the side, but that's up to you. Depending on what border you're using, you can get away with doing that, carrying it up for more than those rows. You just have to make sure it covers that end stitch that goes up. So now to bind off this row, you'll only do when you're finished with your work. You're going to work it exactly like a knit stitch. You're going to insert it like you're doing the knit stitch right in the bottom center of that curve. You're going to take, whoops, gotta grab my green yarn. You're going to yarn over the hook and pull it through that stitch. You're going to go yarn over and pull it through 2 loops only. And what this is doing is it's actually creating a single crochet. So if you do the slip stitch where you just stick it in there and then yarn over and pull it through all the loops, it bends. It actually bends us down, and it really looked horrible. That's why I changed it to the single crochet, because it leaves a nice kind of flat edge at the top. So insert your hook into the next stitch like you're working the knit stitch. Yarn over, pull it through that stitch, yarn over and pull it through 2 loops on your hook. Insert your hook like you're doing a knit stitch in the next stitch, yarn over, pull it through that stitch, yarn over and pull it through 2 loops on your hook. Insert your hook into that next stitch, front to back like a knit stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops only. And you can see how nice and flat that is. And you do lose when you bind off your row. If you have 10 stitches, you end up with 9. If you have 100, you end up with 99. It's just the way the stitches work to bend it over and put it in that stitch. You're losing this edge stitch, but that's okay. That's how it does it. Insert into that next space, yarn over the hook, pull it through, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops. Insert into the next stitch like you're going to do a knit stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through, yarn over the hook, pull it through 2 loops. Insert into the next stitch right through the center and through the back, yarn over the hook, pull it through, yarn over the hook and pull it through 2 loops. Insert into the next stitch like you're doing a knit stitch, front to back, right through the center of that stitch, yarn over the hook, pull it through, yarn over the hook, pull it through 2. Insert your hook into that, both of those stitch ends on the end, yarn over the hook, pull it through that stitch, yarn over the hook, and pull it through 2 loops. And then you would fasten off. Now this doesn't kind of show you, this is the pattern that we just worked. Now my hook is a lot bigger, but if you didn't fasten off this row and you did 2 more rows of green, then it creates, I guess, my husband said, oh, that looks like a zipper. Okay, well, I was trying to think of what to call this stitch. He wanted to call it the zipper stitch. I called it the before and after because I thought that would help you remember your stitches going before and after. But this is what you just did. You change colors with every 2 rows. And if I wanted to bind off this here row, it would have had these little points, which I kind of like this design. And then this one here is where we went ahead and I didn't do the sample, but this is where you would change colors every row. And then if you look, you can kind of see these points up on top here are right here. And that also creates its own nice little pattern. And then of course the classic white, if you don't want to deal with changing ends at all and you just want something that you can sit there and just work on without thinking or, you know, changing colors or counting, then you just do a solid color. Thank you everyone for stopping by and spending some time and crocheting with me. This pattern will be on my website, www.creativegrandma.net, so check that out. The picture of the video, or the picture of the stitch of the week, if you click on the picture, it'll take you right to my YouTube site and you can watch how the stitch is made. If you don't want to deal with watching the video, you can click on the blue link and that allows you to download the pattern immediately right to your own computer. So enjoy, and when you're on the website, please take a few minutes, navigate around, check out my shop where I have crochet patterns and yarns and hooks and all kinds of things from my affiliate advertisers. So I'd appreciate that if you took a few minutes and just looked around. So until next time everyone, happy crocheting.